If you only know South Korea through movies and dramas, everything looks perfectly beautiful. Spotless streets, a fast rhythm of life, sharp fashion, and romance that feels scripted. But there's another Korea that rarely makes it onto posters, one where women are racing in the makeup room before work, sitting in interviews where eyes judge a face before they even hear a voice, walking into public restrooms and instinctively scanning the corners, and having endless conversations about marriage, childbirth, and a fatigue that lingers like the weather. This video is 15 slices of reality with women at the center, living inside the standards, negotiating with them, sometimes using them, sometimes resisting, and sometimes stepping back just to protect their autonomy. If you want to understand what's behind the glow of a modern country like South Korea, watch until the end, because each story below connects into one complete picture. Number 15. Proper beauty standards. The Joseon woman's 3 whites, 3 blacks. If you stand in front of a Joseon-era beauty portrait, what hits you first often isn't the jewelry or the figure, it's a subtle checklist written right on the face. In courtly aesthetics and among Confucian scholars, the ideal female beauty was described in precise formulas: the 3 whites and the 3 blacks. The 3 whites meant pale skin, white teeth, and the whites of the eyes. The 3 blacks referred to dark pupils, dark eyebrows, and dark hair. It sounds like pure aesthetics, but for Joseon women, it was also how society read morality. White skin wasn't only a color, it quietly signaled a life not spent doing hard labor outdoors, tied to status and being protected. The black features hair, brows, eyes suggested modesty, order, and restraint. A face that fit the standard became a kind of social language. It implied family discipline, proper upbringing, and suitability for the roles of wife and daughter-in-law in a Confucian value system. What's striking is that Joseon beauty standards were never separated from the expectation to be good and obedient. Once beauty is tied to what's correct, women are placed inside an evaluation system where the reward is acceptance and the cost is self-expression. A lock of hair, a brow shape, even a lip color could be treated as evidence of character. Here, aesthetics stops being personal taste and becomes soft discipline, pushing women to adjust themselves to be less loud, less noticeable, and above all, not to tilt the axis of what's considered proper. And that's why Joseon leaves behind a very modern paradox. The more specific the beauty standard, the less room women have to breathe. When society gets used to judging women as a test of virtue, taking care of your appearance stops being just beauty. It becomes a kind of passport to be treated decently. That's what makes this story linger. It shows how early on, women's beauty was already being used as a tool to teach them how to stay in place within an order. An order that looks gentle, but survives generation after generation. Number 14. Widows in the Joseon era, when chastity becomes a cage and women's fates are sealed by law. If you want to understand Joseon as a Confucian society run on morality and order, look at the life of a widow. Here, a widow didn't only lose her husband, she often lost the right to begin again. The concept of yeolnyo, the virtuous or chaste woman, was built as a moral ideal. But once that ideal was written into law and turned into a system of rewards and punishments, it became a structured way to control women's lives. Records about yeolnyo note that Joseon law, often discussed in connection with Jungkook Daejeon, recognized bans on widows remarrying, backed by heavy penalties. And it wasn't only the widow who paid the price. Children born from a remarriage could be blocked from the civil service examination route, meaning the family's access to power and honor could be cut off. So remarriage, if it happened, wasn't a private romantic decision anymore. It became a crime with social inheritance, dragging an entire household into stigma. In many Joseon families, a widow's virtue didn't belong only to her, it belonged to the reputation of 2 families. Widows were often expected to live quietly within the husband's household, binding their lives to the memory of the dead as a duty. In that framework, morality wasn't just an inner quality, it was something watched, measured, and rewarded. The state even had mechanisms to publicly honor virtuous women as moral examples. But that honor created a dark paradox. When the reward of prestige becomes big enough, it can turn into extreme pressure. Later periods are described as having cases where widows took their own lives to be recognized as virtuous, bringing honor to their families. There were even cases reported where fiancés did the same when a fiancé died. This is where the cost becomes visible. Women's virtue is transformed into an achievement, and women's lives become collateral for family honor. This story isn't memorable because it simply condemns the past. It's memorable because it reveals a universal mechanism. When society places moral standards onto women's bodies and private lives, those standards can slide from encouragement into coercion. And once law stands behind a norm, the cage becomes so solid that the exit is hard to see. In a national portrait, this is one sharp slice of how Joseon governed through morality, and how women paid the clearest price price for that order. Number 13. S-line, V-line, and the invisible ruler. How the market standardizes women's bodies. When people talk about S-line or V-line in South Korea, treating it as just a beauty trend misses the real point, the feeling of being measured by an invisible ruler. For many women, the body isn't just a body, it's an extra profile attached to the real one, something that can shape how you're treated, a glance on the subway, an attitude in an interview, a tone in a conversation. The obsession with shape doesn't appear out of nowhere. It grows in a social climate where appearance-based discrimination is treated as something everyone knows. A survey by Korea's National Human Rights Commission has been cited for showing that people perceive appearance discrimination as strongly tied to factors like face, weight, and height, and women report stronger effects than men. That helps explain why ideals like a tiny waist, a V-shaped face, or an S-line aren't only aesthetic goals, they become defensive goals. Meet the standard to be stared at less, rejected less, dismissed less as someone who doesn't take care of herself. In hiring culture, the pressure becomes even clearer. Discussions around the Korean job market often mention resume photos, and the debates they trigger a system that can quietly give appearance too much power. When opportunities feel linked to presentation readiness, women get pulled into choices that are never purely personal. Dieting, workouts, body measurements, just enough makeup, correct clothing, always careful not to be too much. This is also where the S-line becomes a story about emotional labor. Women don't only work at the office, they work on their bodies, optimizing them to fit the gaze of customers, co-workers, bosses, and anonymous standards online. International labor research has discussed the idea of a beauty premium, economic advantages linked to attractiveness, in multiple markets, creating incentives to invest in appearance for material returns. For women, that premium often comes with a penalty. If you don't meet the standard, the cost can be being judged unprofessional or not refined. What makes this story stick is how the market can turn beauty standards into infrastructure. No one officially forces women to have an S-line, but social signals can make it feel like not having it means losing. In a society where image is treated like a language, women's bodies become a place of constant proof, not proof of health, but proof of being worthy of being taken seriously. Number 12. 4B and South Korean women's self-defense strategy. Some movements don't begin with street banners, they begin with a private decision. I'm not participating anymore. 4B, often explained as the 4 no's. No dating men, no marriage, no sex, no childbirth, gets talked about as a radical response by a portion of women to lived gender inequality and long accumulated exhaustion. What's notable is that 4B doesn't present itself as a trendy lifestyle, but as a risk reduction strategy. In analyses of Korean society, 4B is often placed alongside other pieces of the puzzle. Labor pressure, the burden of family care, the expectation to be pretty, and anxiety about safety in digital spaces. When women experience marriage as a contract where housework and childcare may be distributed unfairly, withdrawing can feel like a way to protect autonomy, even if the price is loneliness or being labeled. To keep a culturally neutral lens, it's important to say clearly, 4B does not represent all Korean women. Many reports describe it as a minority current that sparks intense debate and backlash. But the fact that it's widely discussed signals something else. There are enough women who feel traditional choices are no longer safe or worth it that a simple concept like 4B can carry real psychological resonance. In the way many local women talk about 4B, what appears most often isn't hatred, but fatigue. Fatigue from being expected to be excellent at work and excellent at care. Fatigue from being judged on appearance and attitude. Fatigue from being told to stay soft even when protecting themselves. 4. B becomes a shortcut. Instead of negotiating inch by inch inside a system that feels structurally tilted against them, some choose to step away from the game. The cultural value of the 4B story is that it forces outsiders to look beyond the romantic shell of K-dramas. Behind the glossy dating scenes, there's a very real social negotiation. Women are questioning the cost of love, marriage, and destiny. Whether you agree or not, 4B remains a sharp cultural signal. When structures don't change, women sometimes choose to change things by silently leaving a form of resistance that isn't loud but is hard to ignore. Number 11. Molka and the fear in public restrooms, women's right to feel safe. Some fears don't show up on travel maps, but they shape the way women enter even the most ordinary place, a public restroom. In South Korea, the Molka crisis hidden camera voyeurism has been discussed as a long-running social issue that coats women's everyday life with constant vigilance. Reports describing a voyeurism epidemic frame Molka as something that can become part of daily life, in the literal sense that women feel they must distrust the space around them. The most unsettling part isn't how small cameras are, it's the psychological effect. Going alone becomes going while guarding yourself. Many women describe habits like checking gaps, scanning suspicious corners, or avoiding isolated restrooms. Documentaries and articles on hidden camera crimes often stress that this isn't merely a privacy violation, it functions as gendered violence in the digital era because it turns women's bodies into consumable content without consent. Numbers that have circulated internationally point to troubling scale. During 2013-2018, over 30,000 hidden camera cases were reported in South Korea. And reported is always the visible surface. Victims may avoid reporting due to shame, fear of blame, or distrust that punishment will be strong enough. Even when they report, the biggest fear is the digital afterlife. Once content spreads, it can follow someone for years across platforms and underground communities, almost impossible to fully retrieve. That's why local reactions often turn practical. Molka is personal safety, but also social trust. A city can be modern, clean, efficient, yet if women don't feel safe after closing the door of a tiny room, that modernity has a crack in it. Women's protests in recent years are frequently mentioned as attempts to turn private fear into public demands for stronger investigations, enforcement, and penalties. What makes the Molka story linger is this. It shows that privacy isn't only a legal concept. For women, it's the right to live without constantly defending themselves in silence. And when society takes Molka seriously, the question stops being, where is the hidden camera? And becomes, why do women have to change their lives instead of perpetrators being removed from shared space? Number 10. Ulzang and teens in the phone camera mirror, when online beauty becomes a young woman's identity. There's a very social media age moment. A teenage girl looks into the front camera not to capture a memory, but to check whether her version of herself is beautiful enough. In Korean culture, Ulzang, roughly the best face, rose as an internet phenomenon where personal images were voted on, shared, and turned into social capital. It didn't just create a beauty trend, it built a reward and punishment system based on likes, comments, and how well you read on screen. For many girls, Ulzang functions like a promise. If you look right in photos, opportunities can appear: attention, photo shoots, followers, even pathways into entertainment, fashion, or service industries. But it can also become an emotional trap. When self-worth is tied to audience reactions, girls learn to view themselves through the crowd's eyes. Which angle flatters? How smooth the skin must be? What kind of big eyes work? That gaze isn't neutral, it's often harsher toward women. Research on the selfie era has argued that selfie culture can reinforce acceptance of lookism, the normalization of discrimination based on appearance, because images become the primary unit of communication online. Beauty then stops being a personal choice and becomes a social skill, knowing filters, lighting, trend makeup. For many girls, this is invisible labor they teach themselves just to avoid falling behind. What's interesting is that Korean society also contains a strong counter-movement. Trends like escape the corset show some women cutting their hair short, reducing makeup, and reclaiming physical ease. The coexistence of Ulzang and escape reveals the tug-of-war young women face. The rewards of fitting the standard versus the freedom of refusing an endless beauty contest. This story sticks because it talks about youth without romanticizing it. It reminds us that for many girls, growing up isn't only school and careers, it's learning to live with a mirror that never turns off, the phone screen. And in that mirror, young women don't only see themselves, they see standards, comparison, and the fear of being left behind if they're not beautiful enough to be recognized. Number 9. South Korea's birth map, when a number turns into a question about women's lives. In South Korea, the story of a low birth rate isn't just a cold statistic buried in a population report. It's like an invisible birth map, where every number gets read as a sign of life choices, anxieties, and especially women's position both at home and at work. In recent years, the government has kept rolling out support packages, while the media tracks even tiny shifts in fertility as if monitoring the country's heartbeat. At one point, South Korea's total fertility rate was repeatedly described as a historic global low, and later, reports showed small year-to-year upticks, little signals that people watched intensely. But if you step out of the data control room and into everyday life, you'll hear women talking about a different calculation: the math of time, energy, and risk. On one hand, career opportunities feel more competitive than ever. On the other, women feel the real cost of pausing work for pregnancy, childbirth, and early childcare. Articles and studies on career breaks in Korea often describe that interruption as a fracture that's hard to heal, leading to longer delays before returning to the labor market and lower pay afterward. In ordinary social conversations, one theme comes back again and again: the burden of unpaid labor at home. Time use survey data shows women spend more time than men on housework and family care, with a gap often described as very large by OECD standards. And when that burden isn't shared, choosing not to have children can stop looking like an extreme stance and start looking like self-protection. Protecting your rhythm of life and protecting your career future. Running alongside the birth story is another thread: gendered economic inequality. The OECD has noted that South Korea's gender pay gap is among the largest in the OECD, and that context shapes a sharp question many women ask. If income, promotion, and stability are already tilted against them, why should they take on the added risks of pregnancy and motherhood in an environment that doesn't truly catch them when they fall? So Korea's birth map, seen through a cultural lens, isn't only a map of babies. It's a map of trust that a woman can build a decent life for herself and not be punished for choosing family. Number 8. Lookism and ajuma. Through society's eyes, when appearance becomes a woman's profile. In South Korea, appearance isn't just about aesthetics. Society often turns it into a signal of discipline, self-control, even attitude toward work and life. That's why lookism discrimination based on looks doesn't exist only as a vague prejudice. For women, it shows up in painfully concrete moments. At school, in job interviews, in service jobs, in everyday public spaces. Many locals describe it as a quick assessment that's convenient for the observer, but a long-term burden for the person being judged. One key point: women tend to be hit harder than men. Surveys released by Korea's National Human Rights Commission have suggested that women report a noticeably stronger impact from appearance-based discrimination, and that the most common targets include the face and body weight. That helps explain why many women feel they don't go to work with only their skills, they go with an image file they're expected to maintain non-stop. And as age increases, another layer appears: prejudice against middle-aged women, often bundled into the label ajuma. In daily life, ajuma, ajumeoni, can simply mean an older woman. But in pop culture and online spaces, it can be twisted into a mocking stereotype: loud, outdated, ruining the vibe. That shift in meaning doesn't just sting, it can spill into real exclusion in public spaces, from arguments around no ajuma zones to the wider spread of no seniors zones in a rapidly aging society. What makes this story memorable isn't one particular sign on one particular door, it's what those signs reflect: women's deeper fear about social value as they age. Age should be a life stage, but under lookism, age can feel like depreciation. A word like ajuma stops being neutral and becomes a label that pushes you out. And that's the cultural nuance here. The more a society celebrates young, pretty, neat, the more women feel forced to prove they don't belong to the group that gets left behind, even as their competence, experience, and contribution grow year after year. Number 7. The rise of women-only spaces. If you've been paying attention in South Korea over the past few years, you'll notice women-only spaces showing up more often. Women-only study cafes, Joseon-style housing, guest houses, even camping sites that accept only female guests. These places rarely market themselves with confrontational slogans. They sell a very ordinary promise: quieter, safer, less exhausting, less constant vigilance. Korean media has described this as a growing slice of everyday life. Culturally, the emergence of women-only spaces isn't only about excluding men. It's a response to the accumulated experience of women in a hyper-competitive city life. Many local women say they're tired of constantly adjusting their behavior to avoid misunderstandings or of carrying the responsibility for preventing risk on their own shoulders. When they step into a space made only for women, they feel something important: a reduction in invisible armor. Less thinking about being watched. Less bracing for small, repeated moments that drain you over time. But that very relief exposes another debate inside Korean society: the line between the right to safety and the risk of normalizing gender separation. Some see women-only spaces as a practical solution to harassment and security anxiety. Others worry that the more society separates, the fewer chances it has to fix root causes: norms of behavior, gender education, and systems that protect victims. Media coverage has also noted how gender-segregated policies and services can trigger fierce arguments about equality. What's striking is that this need for separate space isn't limited to commercial services, it reaches into education too. Debates around girls' schools and fears of losing a safe zone for women suggest that many young people see women-only space as a cultural right, a place to study, connect, and grow without gender pressure hanging over everything. So women-only spaces in Korea can be read as a sociological signal. When women have to create extra space just to feel safe and light again, it isn't just a consumer preference. It's a reminder that gendered experience in the city still carries enough weight to shape the architecture of everyday life. Number 6. The workplace and women's silent zone. In South Korea, stories of workplace sexual harassment are often told not through loud scandals, but through long stretches of silence. Silence because you fear losing your job. Silence because you fear being labeled difficult. Silence because internal reporting systems can sometimes feel like a loyalty test rather than protection. In a society shaped by hierarchy and organizational atmosphere, women often calculate layers of consequences before they dare to name what happened. International reports and surveys on labor rights have long pointed out both the prevalence of harassment and the high rate of non-reporting. Human Rights Watch, citing Korean government survey data, has noted that many victims choose not to take action often because they doubt they'll be protected or fear retaliation. In recent years, Korean media has continued reporting that non-reporting remains widespread, and the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family has been quoted as saying most people who experience harassment do not report it. The problem is this: harassment in the workplace is rarely just one bad person. It often relies on power imbalance. When the harasser is a superior, a client, or someone who controls promotion opportunities, women are forced into a brutal dilemma. Speak up and risk your career, or stay silent and carry the damage for months or years. In many stories shared in Korea, what exhausts women isn't only the incident, it's what comes after. Maintaining a face of normality, still smiling, still working, still attending meetings as if nothing happened. Culturally, Korean workplaces still carry traces of strong collectivism, team honor, loyalty, and long working hours. When the group is placed above the individual, a complaint can be reframed as hurting the team. That reframing is exactly what makes women hesitate, and it creates the zone of silence, a place where people know something is wrong, but everyone has a reason to look away. For documentary-style storytelling, the value of this topic is that it lets you read a society through what looks private. A modern country isn't measured only by GDP or technology, it's also measured by how women are protected in workplaces, where they spend much of adult life. When the silence starts being named, society is forced to look back at itself. Laws can change quickly, but power culture and fear of retaliation take time to shift. Number 5. When some women choose cross-border love and marriage as a way to break the current. The phrase "no marriage visa" sounds like a slogan, but in the Korean context, it points to something more subtle. Some women start looking at the world as an option for relationships and future, not only as a place to travel or study. To be clear, there's no solid evidence that women are leaving Korea in masses because Korean men are bad. But there is data showing that international marriage is a real part of society, and gender debates can make cross-border choices feel more visible and more politically charged. Statistics on multicultural marriages in Korea show it isn't a one-way pattern of Korean men and foreign women. Many reports based on official data have noted a significant share of Korean women, foreign men within multicultural marriages. Those numbers don't automatically reveal motives, but they do show that cross-border marriage is no longer a rare exception. So how do local women talk about it? For some, it's simply globalization in action. Studying abroad, working in international environments, traveling, meeting and loving someone from elsewhere. For others, there's also a kind of cultural negotiation, searching for a relationship they believe will feel more breathable, where housework is shared more fairly, personal boundaries are respected, and family conversations are less suffocating. Notably, that argument often appears alongside debates about unequal caregiving burdens and gender inequality at home. Meanwhile, Korean society's reaction can be complicated. Some see it as personal freedom and a normal feature of an open era. Others read it defensively, as a rejection of Korean men, or as making the country look bad. When gender conflict intensifies, private choices can get pulled into collective confrontation. International coverage of Korea's gender war has described polarization and the ways personal decisions become politicized. What makes cross-border marriage a powerful story is that it's not only about romance, it's about the ability to imagine a different life. When a woman believes her future could be better outside familiar cultural boundaries, the decision is both romantic and practical. And told neutrally, it becomes a meeting point of big social forces: labor, gender, family, globalization, inside one very ordinary human choice: who you choose to walk with for the rest of your life. Number 4. 4B on the skin. When a woman's body becomes a place to inscribe a life stance. In many cultures, women's bodies are treated like a screen, where society projects expectations. What kind of beauty, what kind of behavior, when to marry, when to have children. In modern South Korea, as feminism debates and gender pressure intensify, the body becomes a site of response not only through words, but through visible choices: hair, clothing, makeup, and sometimes symbols, small marks, tattoos, or other signs tied to a personal stance. The 4B movement, often explained as refusing dating, sex, marriage, and childbirth with men, has been described by many international sources as a sharp reaction to gender inequality and negative experiences that some women feel in society. The scale and representativeness of 4B remain debated. But what matters culturally is this: 4B isn't only a statement. It can become a lifestyle, And lifestyles often create symbols so insiders recognize each other, or so a person can remind herself what she chose. Here, the idea of a 4B tattoo should be understood more as symbolism than as a measurable statistic. There isn't reliable data showing large numbers of Korean women collectively tattooing "no marriage, no childbirth." But in online culture, using words, symbols, or small tattoos as a note on the skin is a familiar way to make a belief feel heavier and more real, not necessarily to provoke others, but to claim ownership over one's body and one's life. This intersects with another movement that drew attention: escape the corset, where some women cut their hair short, reduce makeup, and reject beauty routines as a way to step out of the social corset. When women remove what was treated as mandatory, they don't only change appearance, they change who controls the story of them. If corset symbolizes being shaped by society, then marks on the body, whether hair, clothing, or a tattoo, symbolize self-shaping. Of course, society doesn't react in one voice. Some interpret these signs as extreme, as separating from community. Others see them as a new language women use. When words get twisted, the body becomes a declaration that doesn't ask permission. And that's what makes this story memorable. It shows women aren't only fighting at the level of policy or debate, they're fighting at the micro level, in how they step outside every day, with their own bodies as a boundary that must be respected. Number 3. Plastic surgery as luggage for job interviews. In many places, an interview begins with questions about competence. But for a lot of young women in South Korea, the feeling of beginning comes much earlier when choosing an ID photo, adjusting lighting, finding the right angle, and asking, will this face cost me points before I even get through the door? That pressure isn't purely imagined. Gallup Korea statistics have been cited by international media as suggesting that around a third of women aged 19 to 29 reported having had cosmetic surgery. The point isn't the number as shock value, it's the social logic behind it. When career opportunity feels linked to appearance, surgery can be framed as a rational investment, almost like an extra certificate. Many women describe eyelid surgery, rhinoplasty, jawline procedures not as wanting to become someone else, but as reducing the risk of being undervalued in an intensely competitive job market. Even more importantly, Korea's hiring culture has long involved collecting dense personal information, including photos. Even when there are pushes toward blind hiring, policy analysis has pointed out that blind isn't always truly blind, and the continued presence of portrait photos is one reason appearance can keep influencing evaluation. For women, the consequences often come in 2 layers. The first is financial and physical: surgery costs, recovery time, anxiety about complications, and a loop of just one more tweak to reach a standard that keeps moving. The second is more subtle: the sense that your value is hanging on your face. When society rewards the right look, women can get pulled into constant optimization not to show off, but to survive. That's why Korea's plastic surgery story is best told as a cultural slice of labor and gender. A choice that looks personal is fed by structure, brutal job competition, habits of judging through images, and a repeated message that women must arrive already pretty enough just to enter the room. In that environment, the knife doesn't only touch skin, it reshapes the belief that, for women, competence can come second to beauty. Number 2. Deepfakes and a form of violence women constantly face in South Korea. Deepfakes aren't just a technology story. They're a story about honor, safety, and women's right to exist normally in digital space. The frightening part of deepfakes isn't only how real they look, it's the speed of spread and the helplessness. One ordinary photo can be stolen, and a woman's body and identity can be reconstructed into something she never did yet. The consequences become painfully real. International reporting has described South Korea facing waves of digital sex crimes involving deepfakes, with victims overwhelmingly women and even minors. Many cases are described as happening inside familiar environments, schools, group chats, online communities where perpetrators aren't always strangers. That closeness intensifies the crisis. Victims fear not only the content spreading, but also the gaze of people around them, suspicion, blame, the accusation that it's their fault for having posted photos. Social response in Korea suggests the issue is being treated with growing seriousness, including tougher legal changes. Korean media has reported legislative moves to increase penalties for producing, possessing, or even consuming deepfake sexual content, reflecting an effort to position digital crimes where they belong, as serious harm. At the same time, reports often highlight a disturbing trend: perpetrators can be very young, while deepfake tools are becoming cheaper and easier to use. Another layer of the story is the impact on famous women. For public figures, image is professional capital. Deepfakes turn that asset into a vulnerability, harming reputation and income at once. But even when the victim isn't famous, the aftermath can freeze a life: dropping out of school, quitting a job, disappearing from social media, losing a sense of safety in places that used to feel normal. Culturally, the deepfake story reveals an old rule in a new form. Women are still punished through honor. The difference is that what used to be a village rumor is now an algorithm in your phone. When Korea tightens laws and builds support systems, you can read it as an attempt to redefine safety in the digital age. Safety isn't only not being touched, it's not being turned into a fake version of yourself for other people to consume. Number 1. The hanbok. Corset. Waist cinching until fainting at weddings. In a traditional Korean-style wedding, there are moments when the bride can feel like she can't breathe freely. Not because the ceremony is too long or because she's emotional, but because the outfit is tied tight to create the silhouette considered most beautiful on camera. Shoulders lowered, neck elongated, upper body neat, and a waist that looks almost flawless. From the outside, hanbok is a symbol of softness and grace. But for the woman wearing it, that grace can sometimes come with very physical discomfort. Pressure across the chest and waist, limited arm movement, and the need to hold perfect posture through the ceremony and photo shoot. The tying and fastening in hanbok, the ribbons, sashes, layered structure, is part of the dressing technique itself. What's interesting is that corset here isn't necessarily a literal Western corset. It's a modern way to describe the feeling of being shaped. Historically, as women's jagori became shorter in late Joseon, people used hariri, a cloth band wrapped fairly tight around the chest area to prevent skin showing between top and skirt, balancing modesty and form. In formal wear and ceremonial reconstructions, sashes such as daedai can also be tied around the body to complete the outfit, especially in court or ritual contexts. So, hanbok has long had its own language of tying and wrapping, less about an hourglass waist, more about neatness, modesty, and controlled form. So where does the idea of cinching until fainting come from? Often, it's tied more to modern practice, wedding studios, photo culture, and pairing hanbok with shapewear or corset belts to create a smaller-looking waist on camera. Here, women stand between two forces. One is tradition, hanbok as family symbol and ritual, where the bride is expected to look proper. The other is modern aesthetics. Wedding photos must be perfect, the body must look tight, everything must match visual standards. Vogue has described hanbok as a kind of precise anatomy of posture and fabric space, meaning a tiny difference can change the whole look. When that precision combines with shapewear, the hard-to-breathe experience can become real, even if it isn't a mandatory traditional rule. Locally, many people talk about this very practically. Endure a little to look beautiful on your wedding day, like high heels or hours of makeup. But there's also a growing reflection in Korean society that beauty standards demand too much from women's bodies. Modern discussions of corset in Korea, like Escape the Corset, show that corset has become a metaphor for all beauty pressures that function as discipline, not just one garment. After these 15 stories, what remains isn't a simple conclusion like Korea is good or Korea is bad. Women here live inside a system that celebrates their image while also demanding they pay a price to fit that image. There are pressures from the past and pressures from today pressing down at the same time. Between then and now, women have to find their own path, through surgery, through body discipline, through women-only spaces, through quietly stepping out of the love marriage script, or through speaking up until the law and society are forced to change. Who controls women's image? Who defines what counts as beautiful, proper, respectable? Who pays the price when a social standard becomes an unspoken rule in hiring, in families, in public spaces? These 15 stories aren't meant to frame Korean women as victims, but as subjects living real lives, carrying real pressure, reacting in real ways, and redrawing the boundaries of freedom in very concrete terms. If you enjoyed this video and want to keep traveling with us to explore more countries and more untold stories around the world, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next episode. See you in the next journeys. This video is for reference only, so make sure to research further from multiple sources before making any decisions.